Welcome. I'm Frank Vignone, President and CEO of Old Salem Museums and Gardens and the Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts. You've found me in the kitchen of the Mitch House, and the reason why I'm sitting here in this beautiful sun coming through the windows is that Mitch House is one of the buildings we're going to be opening up for our Phase 2 reopening in August. And so today is really Ask Me Anything, question and answer. I would assume we've got some questions about a reopening. I know we have some questions about the tavern. I'll start by just giving you a sense of what's happened this year at Old Salem. So in January and February and March, our leadership team, which consists of 21 members of all the divisions of Old Salem, met regularly in a very intensive analysis about how we should be dealing with 2021. The conclusions of all of that work led us to understanding that a gradual reopening is one that would allow us to keep a very high level of visitor experience and allow us to do repairs on the buildings as well as staff up slowly so that we could not only get high quality people back at Old Salem, but we can train them in a way that's not really under any pressure. So this gradual reopening is really very much about the kind of unique circumstances that we have as a living history site. And I think a lot of you may understand this, but maybe not the details, but Old Salem is anywhere between 40 acres and 100 acres of interpreted landscape. We've got 90 historic buildings, 20-something of them are interpreted. Before COVID, we had 137 employees. This is a fairly sizable ship to kind of restart and push in a direction after the COVID closing. And that's another reason why the kind of gradual reopening was so important. And I've mentioned this before, that around 70% of our attendance comes from school groups. And we've been very closely monitoring all of the school districts that come to Old Salem, both last year and this year, monitoring them. And we're hearing that they're not coming back this fall, and most likely they'll be coming back next fall. So we have an enormous chunk of not only visitor experience, but revenue, retail sales, ticket sales, which won't be coming back until next fall. So our gradual reopening is to accommodate walk-in visitation, which is generally lower, considerably lower, than our school groups. So that's another reason why the gradual reopening is so important. We want to make sure that we allow for a visitor experience for walk-in visitation, and that is different than scheduled group tours for schools. They're very different kinds of experiences. And so our Phase 1 really involved the launch of Salem Pathways, which is our take your smartphone, choose your own character, get a map in one of our outdoor boxes that are sprinkled throughout the historic district, and kind of do your own self-guided experiments with the historic narratives. The second part of that Phase 1 opening was opening our Winkler Bakery. And our Winkler Bakery is doing really well. We're selling out of our fresh baked goods. We're having cars line up for blocks into the historic district. And every month we're having special new recipes, and those are selling out as well. So we appreciate everybody coming to Winkler. Those hours are Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 10 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Now remember that, because when we get to Phase 2 reopening, which is at the beginning of August, we're keeping those exact same hours. And in fact, when we get to Phase 3, we suspect we're going to be keeping the exact same hours. And again, that's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 10 until 2. And so what it will do is allow for families and others to come to the district, Phase 2 reopening, the historic venues. So now we're looking at August 4th as the Phase 2 reopening. We have Salem Pathways, we have Winkler Bakery, and we also opened the Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts, which is MESDA for short. So those three things opened in Phase 1. Phase 2, we're opening the Mitch House. The boys' school is right across the street. And then we're opening the Seed Saving Lab, which is also right across the street. So in addition to Salem Pathways and MESDA, we're going to be opening up Mitch House, boys' school, and the Seed Saving Lab. And then we're opening up our visitor center. And the visitor center in the past has really been a place you would go and just buy tickets. Well, part of our strategic realignment in the reopening is the VC is becoming a venue in itself. And so we're having special exhibits on travel and tourism, and we're bringing collections items that you've probably never seen, and we're bringing them to the forefront. And so you'll come to the visitor center and you'll see these handful of new exhibits. The second thing that most likely none of you have seen is the original 1950s model that was made for fundraising when the concept of Old Salem as a tourist attraction came about. And so we're bringing that out from our collection storage, and you're going to be able to see that. And that's just really a pretty amazing kind of historic artifact in itself. So it's kind of a meta relationship. You're going to be visiting Old Salem, and you're going to be able to see a model of Old Salem before Old Salem existed in the form that it exists now. We also have watercolors that were painted in the 1950s that show Old Salem in the future, and what's kind of neat is it shows Old Salem the way it exists today as well. So it's what they wanted it to be, and then you're going to be able to walk the district and see what it has become. The similarities of the two, pretty fascinating. And then after Phase 2, we're already looking at Phase 3, which looks like it will be at the beginning of October. Our hope is, according to how staffing rehiring goes, when that will be and how much we'll be able to reopen, our hope is that we'll be very close to more fully opening with more historic and craft-centered venues. We think that will be, I think it's October 5th is the day that we're planning for the Phase 3. So that's all the kind of administrative background stuff that's going on. Happy to answer your questions. I have Samantha Smith sitting here. Hi, Samantha. She is Director of Community Engagement. She also is going to be running the Visitor Center. She has a preservation background, and she knows how to work all of the live digital technology. So, Samantha, welcome. Thanks for doing this. And do we have any questions?
Yes, we do, Frank. Thank you for the lovely introduction. So we have a question here that just popped up on our Facebook page, and I'd like to take this moment to encourage everyone who's watching to please feel free to leave your comments, your questions in the chat, and I will read them to Frank. The question is, are researcher fees for MESDA planned to remain stable? I noticed they were lowered some, much appreciated, but also that they've changed a few times in the past year or so.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think just as unpredictable as the pandemic, it has been unpredictable the level of service that we could give with the research labs. We have talked about that. I believe that for the rest of 2021, they will remain stable at this point. We'll make sure that we'll let you know in conversations like this. But what we want to do is have all of our assets, whether it's the Rare Books Library, the regular library, or the Seed Saving Lab, or any of those things, open to the public. So however best we can do that and still cover our costs so that we can provide a really good assistance for you. Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Frank. Okay, so we're going to get started with a few that we had that we were gathered before the Q&A. The biggest one that we've seen is, what are Old Salem's reopening plans? Can you walk us through that? I know you just did a little bit, but any other information you can give us?
Well, our reopening plans are tied to our analysis and conclusions that were discussed at the beginning of the year. And we've had several President's Q&As, several videos that I've talked about that. One thing that we've determined is that we would be really flexible in 2021. Again, we know the school groups won't be coming back until next year, significantly coming back until next year. And so as things change, we'll be able to be flexible with that reopening. Right now, just as I explained, we have completed phase 1 reopening, which was Salem Pathways, MESDA, and Winkler Bakery. Phase 2 is Mitch House, Boys School, Seed Saving Lab, and the Visitor Center. And phase 3, I don't have the details yet because it really is indicative of how nuanced the reopening plans are. Our hope is that considerably more can open in phase 3. Does that answer the question, do you think, Samantha?
I think so, Frank, yes. And you kind of started with some information as well. I think that's good. Another question that we've seen is, are you hiring? Is Old Salem hiring right now?
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about that because so much has changed in the operations, not only Old Salem, but all nonprofits, museums, cultural attractions, that even before COVID, we were reorganizing our educational interpretive model. And so much has changed, not only because of that strategic realignments and restructuring, because we asked the teachers what they needed and we're responding with changes with how we perform our interpretation, that those things are making changes in the job descriptions, the kinds of people that we need, the responsibilities that new team members will have. And then we're also looking at new training protocol, new staffing hiring protocol. All of that has changed in the last, let's say, 2 years. So the answer is yes. We have employment opportunities up on our website right now. And in fact, we just finished one hiring and we're moving on with other that will be coming online. So if you're interested in those positions, they'll all be under employment on the website. They'll be listed. Some of them, like the interpretive educational positions, both part-time and full-time, will be revolving, which means as we get people, we'll be interviewing them, we'll be bringing them on gradually so that we can do the training so that things will happen in a really measured, thoughtful way. Answer is yes. We'd love to have people apply. I'm happy. So that's all the backstory. Before COVID, we had, I think, maybe 6 months RFP, a request for proposal, for not only architects to help us restore the building so that we could put in a new restaurant person, but also for new restaurant vendors. Both of those were chosen almost immediately before the COVID pandemic closure. And because of the pandemic closure, it's not something that we put at the front of our priority list. Restaurants are having a really hard time now. And not only do we feel like putting a new restaurant starting up is a difficult thing, but we actually don't like the idea of competing with our community-based restaurants because they're having and have had such a difficult time. It's just not a good thing to do for a community partner. So the RFP did choose Muddy Creek, and they have a small cafe already in Old Salem. So in phase 2, Muddy Creek Restaurant will also open up, and they will be providing that lunchtime food vendor service from phase 2 on. And the tavern most likely won't be online as an operating restaurant maybe fourth quarter of next year, maybe the spring of the following year. So I think that's a little bit more information than everybody wanted, but that's the truth.
That's what we're doing today, Frank.
Yeah.
Is we're giving too much information.
So I apologize to everybody.
So we have a long question and some comments here.
Sure.
So this comes from Facebook. What is it with all the phasing in well over a year beyond the rest of the state and opening retail and restaurants? You've missed out on a lot of revenue, especially this summer, with a lot of pent-up demand. This ultra-cautious approach seems odd to me.
That's a good question, and thank you. And you're certainly not the only one who's asked that question. So let's also understand that the COVID closure was due to COVID, the pandemic, and precautions. The reopening phasing has to do with our operations. Now, one thing to understand is, as a living history site, you really can't compare us to other sites. You really can't even compare us to other living history sites. Every site has a very unique constellation of retail, food vendor service, and educational. There are some living history sites that have very small school tours that come, and they have huge walk-in visitation. They're sites that benefit from opening up really quickly, because the pent-up activity that you're suggesting is occurring with walk-in visitation. However, Old Salem's visitation, as I said, probably 70% of it, is tied directly to school tours. It's a different kind of visitor experience, it's a different process, and then also a good bit of our revenue come from retail. But traditionally, it's not retail tied to walk-in people who don't buy tickets. The retail is tied to ticket buyers. And remember, I just told you that ticket buyers are tied mostly to school tours, chaperones, and parents who come with the school kids. So when I can understand why it would seem like we're being overly cautious. North Carolina's opening up, restaurants can open, retail can open. Understand that our retail and our restaurants are tied to us as a living history site. It's not like, for instance, a retail or restaurant spot on 4th Street in downtown. They're isolated, their destination points and their missions are tied to retail and restaurant sales. Our mission is to just kind of open up with 30% of your staff. And most living history sites are getting around 50% of their normal visitation. You have to pretty much have 100% staffing even for 30 or 50% visitation. And as it is, a living history site is very taxed to break even with a very labor-intensive staffing and interpretive model with visitation. So it's a real balancing act, and those are the sorts of things that the leadership team and the board of directors has really been doing conscious business analysis and thoughtful reconsideration. That's one of the reasons why Winkler Bakery was one of the ones that we opened in phase 1, because Winkler Bakery is one of those retail centers that has a destination quality to it. We also moved retail from Moravian Book and Gift into one room of Winkler Bakery. So we're trying to, in the best way we can, modify our operations that accept the limitations and that special constellation of our operations and still provide the visitor experience that I think you're asking for. Again, sorry Samantha, it's a big question with a lot of complications to the answers.
That's okay. Thank you so much for elaborating and giving us all that information. A comment that I see here is, please keep your website updated. Our friends drove all the way from Charleston, South Carolina to find everything closed. They were disappointed and upset about the poor communication. I can take that one.
You sure you want to?
Yeah, I can.
Explain to them why you can take that one.
I can take that one. I run the website. I do a lot of the communications, and I've heard this from several people, and I'm hoping that those of you who are listening can help me. Currently, the Old Salem website has a banner that tells you what is open, what is closed, and it also has some other banners lower down that are photographic banners that tell you in more depth what is open, what's closed. I know,
and those have been there.
Those have been there the whole time.
Yeah.
On Google, we took the hours down because it was confusing people. It took us a long time to be able to gain control of that to do so, but those are now removed. So please, if you see something that says we're fully open, or you see something that has hours that are not correct, please let us know and be specific about where you saw them, because everything that we can see and that we have controlled has the correct information.
Including all social media platforms.
That's right, yeah. And I hate to see that, because comments like that make me very sad, because I don't want people to be disappointed.
And also our press releases, everything that we've been saying, all of our signage, it gives all of the dates, all of the times, days of the week. So yeah, it makes us really sad that that's the case, but we went and looked at our website. We had a comment similar, and at the top of the website, it's been there for months, made it really clear. I think that it might be difficult to pause and really see what those special hours are.
Right, so I'm going to try to do an even better job of that, because that is not the only comment I've seen, and I'm very sorry that that happened to your friends. Okay, and someone was wondering, is there any way that we could get the tavern up and running by April 2022, which is for the 250th anniversary of Salem Academy and College? Lots of people will be in town for that. Yeah,
I am pretty sure that that will not be able to happen. We just have too much. We have between $400,000 and $500,000 worth of infrastructure, ADA accessible additions, basic work that has to happen to the tavern. So it's just probably not something that will be able to happen. But I do think that we'll be able to do some special situations at Old Salem to join in on the celebration.
Definitely. And yes, we miss the tavern too. A lot of people are commenting that they miss the tavern.
Yeah, of course.
We're excited to get that up and running as soon as we can, but as Frank said, there are a lot of considerations.
I will add, Samantha, that food service as part of the visitor experience is really important to us. It is actually one of the ones that we cited in our analysis earlier this year. One of the things we're doing is we're adding an entirely new component to Moravian Book and Gift, which is the retail store, which will be opening in phase 3. We're opening up a coffee and chocolate bar with cafe tables. So at the front of the store, you'll be able to sit and have coffee and chocolates. Brasstown Chocolates will be running that for us. It will be a really kind of nice addition for food service. It is something that we continue to think about. We have the second floor of Winkler Bakery that we're starting to consider as another food service location. We know it's important, and we want to make sure that they're good quality locations and food that we can provide for the visitors.
Frank, we have a question here that is kind of what we've talked about before, but there is a different component to it. So on Facebook, someone's wondering, how does Old Salem survive for this long without a revenue stream? It's kind of odd that you're so far behind everyone else as far as opening. Does Old Salem receive any money from local, state, or federal taxes?
I would say that we actually receive fairly small amounts, considering that we fluctuated between close to a $9 million operating budget, and right now we're around a $6 million operating budget right before COVID. The city of Winston-Salem gives us $197,000 a year. And the county just gave us $100,000. As you can tell, when you're looking at a $6 million operation, that money is extremely valuable, and we thank both of the municipalities for giving us the money. But it's not really substantially in a large percentage contributions from municipalities nor the state. We are not state-owned. We are a private organization. And again, even though we're close to a kind of traditional walk-in visitation, I would say that our community engagement since we were closed physically has really increased with all of the digital work that we did last year. A lot of the educational components with Learning in Place were requested by school teachers, those homeschooling, and they were used throughout all of last year. I would say that we do have an endowment, although it's greatly restricted, and a lot of that interest income goes towards specific parts of our operations. MESDA has its own chunk of money, which is the Museum of Early Southern Decorative Art, and then the town of Old Salem has a chunk of that money, which is the total endowment. I will say that we have had extremely capable and wonderful development team here, and they have been raising money to continue the Learning in Place videos and things like that. Let's also not forget that Old Salem received a PPP loan. That's how we retained our, I think it's roughly 61 employees through the pandemic closing. And we also have received a second PPP loan. And so that money, well over 90% of that money, and you only had to use around 60% of that money for salaries, well close to 100% of that money went to paying people's salaries. So that's really the kind of answer, I think, to that question, Sam.
Okay, thank you. We have another question here. Given the vulnerability created by reliance on school tours, are there plans to appeal more to non-school visitors?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because, as I said, there are some living history and cultural sites that would love to have our school tour numbers. One thing that we did start to do in around 2017 is we started a new program called Salem Saturdays, which was really pushing our family-friendly programming, walk-in visitation on Saturdays. And I think our number was increasing around 19% of attendance on Saturdays. That, being so successful, is the very thing that we were moving toward right before COVID. So the answer is yes. Not only do we want to keep and expand our school tour visitation, we want to expand our basic walk-in visitation, and we're going to do that by concentrating on those Salem Saturdays, adding beefier programs, concerts, activities for families, intergenerational things, and homeschooled groups. So yes, the answer is that we were already moving in that direction probably 2 years in, and then COVID hit. So we're right there with you, absolutely.
Frank, what are the top priorities for...
Bloom House Center is opening up. We're working on the visitor center. When we hire a new director of preservation, because we're reorganizing that division to make it more public facing, one of the things we want to do is, because so many people are interested in restoration, we're making all of our restoration projects public facing, and that means that when you come to the district, you'll be able to see us restoring buildings, parts of buildings, painting them, doing window and shutter repair. And so when we establish that new strategy, then we'll be able to, in a more long-term, maybe 10-year, 20-year plan, prioritize what we're doing. But you should be able to walk through the district right now, and because of our Fresh Code initiative, which is going on all through 2021, you'll be able to see some really beautifully painted buildings and restoration. Mitch House got restoration, roof rafter work on the shed in the back. I mean, there's lots of restoration pieces that if you go on the President's Update tab on the webpage, all of the Fresh Code initiative updates on PDF form are on there, and you can see all the restoration work, which is a beginning step of making all of our restoration work public facing.
Thanks, Frank. So we've got a comment here that says, thrilled with Frank's vision and new initiatives. So glad he's leading the way. Such thoughtful and yummy additions to Old Salem. Thank you. That's a nice comment.
That's nice.
And then right after that, we have someone.
Don't want to get you too excited. Okay, go ahead.
I had to give you a positive before I gave you a criticism.
That was the honey. Now, go ahead.
So, this person wants to know, by putting that chocolate cafe in Moravian Book and Gift, what will happen to the traditional retail store that we've loved for decades? I've heard that many are disappointed that they can't find the great things that used to be in that space. Thoughts?
Sure. The retail store is still there. You've been there in the last 5 years. The retail outlet has actually increased in the quality of goods. Pat Albert, our director of retail, has been very consciously and strategically scouring North Carolina for just the best potters and makers. I would say Moravian Book and Gift has brought really incredibly talented artists. Many of them have demonstrations in Moravian Book and Gift. The area we're using for the coffee and cafe bars really at the very beginning, as you walk in, and that area is not a lot of square footage. So what you'll see is exactly the way it was 5 years ago, just probably slightly more compact. And now you can sit and drink coffee and have chocolates while you're thinking about the retail store. So you will not be losing anything with Book and Gift. If anything, you're going to be gaining more in the experience.
That's right. And we've also redesigned the inside of Winkler as well to add more retail inside of Winkler. So
and you can go to that right now. And but I want to say in 2017, maybe 2018, we started Handcrafted Salem, which is a branded series of pottery pieces, leather pieces, textile pieces that we make and we sell at our outlets. And you can actually go to Winkler now, and there's a room dedicated to all of those kind of special retail things that people love. And let's not forget that throughout the entire pandemic, we've been selling so much stuff online on the website with our store. That's another way that we've been bringing in revenues, because everybody's been really wonderfully buying from Old Salem. You can buy not fresh baked, but the cookies and the Moravian stars and all of those things. You can go online now and buy them, or you can come to Winkler. So thank you for wanting to buy stuff.
Yes, thank you. And that's oldsalem.org/shop. We have a great question.
Okay.
This is a tough question, but it's good.
You can help me. Okay, go ahead.
I'll try.
Okay.
This is a great question. So this person wants to know, are ticket fees going to return to pre-pandemic amounts? Has there been an assessment of whether or not there would be an increase in people who could visit if the tickets were less expensive? So could lowering ticket prices actually result in more revenue? Have we done that kind of analysis recently?
Yeah. Oh yeah, tons of analysis. It was done even before I got here. It is a juggling act, ticket price versus visitor experience. As I said earlier, a living history site by its very nature is very labor intensive. And that means you have a big staff to provide the visitor experience that you want to provide. And so that ticket price, which before COVID was $27 for adults, I want to say it was $13 or $11 for students, accompanying students, with $15 for special student tours. All of that is very carefully analyzed every year before the budget is worked up. And a lot of times I talk about right sizing our operations. And what that means is, what's the best way that we can provide the highest quality experience for the school tours and our walk-in visitors, the best scholarship, the best educational programming, the best kind of retail experience, the best baked goods. How can we provide all of that for the most efficient way so that we can keep the ticket prices down? And so that is a juggling act, as all as you can imagine. So it's not necessarily an issue of, well, if you brought more people in, that you would bring in more money. It's not that simple. And as I talked about our school tours versus walk-in visitation, that in itself is a balancing act. It's a very good question. It's an analysis that we do all of the time. We're constantly trying to keep the ticket price at a reasonable level. And it is a struggle, very honestly. And then it doesn't seem to be a struggle for other places that have higher ticket prices. For instance, there are some in North Carolina that are $85 per person to go to. And our visitor experience is probably more intensive and in depth than perhaps some other sites. So it is a struggle to provide a ticket price that people still feel comfortable with. It's interesting because as a museum professional, you think of what you provide as an experience of education, and I think a lot of visitors think of it as fee for service, which is you pay $18, you go to the movies, you see a movie. When you come to Old Salem or you come to a living history site, you're not necessarily paying fee for service. You're paying fee so that this experience can be provided for your class or for your family. There's not necessarily a direct one-to-one relationship, and that's why it's a nonprofit. We're not a for-profit organization, and so that whole mechanism financially in the business plan is different. Again, sorry, Sam, for the complicated answer.
That's okay. That's why we're doing this. So the next one's an easy one.
Okay.
Do we require masks in buildings?
We're doing exactly what is really being suggested. For those who are fully vaccinated, it's your choice. For those that are not vaccinated, a mask. Of course, that's the honor system, and that's the way it will be now in Winkler, MESDA, and that's the way it will be in Phase 2. And when Phase 3 comes around, we'll renegotiate and see what the CDC and the state of North Carolina says.
Thank you.
It is confusing because even as just a normal person going anywhere, I just keep my mask in my pocket because I just don't know if they're going to ask me to wear it or not. And I'll put it on if they ask me to wear it. I'm perfectly fine with that. It's their choice. It's a privately owned venue.
We're back to ticket prices with another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do we have any idea how ticket prices affect demographics? And do you want to talk about maybe the other programs that we've been exploring that deal with this exact issue?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there are lots of organizations that have been looking at it, and I've been a proponent to different organizations of pay what you wish. There, even in New York City, if you're a resident of New York City, that you can now get a card and that you can get into those New York City owned venues for free. There's just lots of different ways that cultural organizations are trying to make themselves available to a much broader demographic. It's absolutely something that we talk about all the time. It's one of the reasons why we started a special program with elementary schools in Forsyth County that are Title I schools that we're allowing their students to come multiple times as a pilot project for free, so that we can kind of learn how this could work, and then we would raise money specifically to cover our costs to allow those students to show up. We did the same thing with our Access Salem Day, which was right before COVID, the fall before, which was to learn ways that Old Salem was not doing a good job to gain access for people with disabilities. And so we literally asked people to come and fill out forms and help us decide how to do that, and what the financial component would be. It's something we're wide open for, and we continually look at it. We understand that not everyone can afford the ticket price that is established right now, and we're looking at different ways on how to do that. Sam, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Just that we're not unique in this problem. A lot of organizations face this, and we're doing a lot of work right now to kind of talk to other organizations who have combated this exact issue, and we're looking at different organizations that we could potentially partner with to address this, because it's really core to our mission that we are accessible and open to all, and that we're a resource for the community. So we take this very seriously.
And I will say that in acknowledgement that not everyone can afford a ticket, we do feel strongly that just even walking through the district should provide you with an educational component. And that's something that we constantly bring up in our conversations. How can this kind of education of place in itself become a kind of non-ticketed endeavor? It's not easy because every building costs money to maintain. Every piece of property costs money to maintain. And I hate to keep bringing it back down to money, but that money equates to people's lives because they're employees. And employees have families, and employees have to buy groceries, and employees have to pay rent and car payments and medical bills. So it's not just Old Salem wanting money, it's Old Salem wanting to be a partner with its staff in being able to maintain the staff's salaries and all of that. So it's not just maintaining the building so we need money. It's really the kind of importance of the staff to provide the educational experiences.
Right.
That weighs heavy on me.
That's your job. It's
Yeah.
a big part of your
Yeah.
job. And another thing I'll mention too is that every time we come up with a new program, for example, Salem Pathways, we decided that that program can run as a pay-what-you-wish model, which enabled that to be open to anyone who wants to come into the district and do it. So we're always having those conversations within our departments.
And we did the same thing for Things, the same thing with Salem Presents. Those were digital, online, scholarly discussions and presentations. We wanted absolutely anyone to be able to log on. And in fact, our Summer Institute MESDA presentations just this afternoon, it's our first time really experimenting with a hybrid virtual real-life presentation, and we made the presentations free online. So it is something that we feel strongly about.
I think those are all of our questions, Frank. Is there
Okay.
anything else you want to conclude with?
No. Thank you for the questions. We're going to continue to do this as we reopen. I know there continue to be kind of thoughts about our process. All I can say is that everything about this process is being thoughtful, and we're looking at not only the finances, but the long-term sustainability of Old Salem. And what we're doing now means that 10 years from now, we will be a strong, viable cultural institution for the city of Winston-Salem and the state of North Carolina. It will be the case, without a doubt, if we continue this gradual reopening, that the way Old Salem will be in 10 years will be in a better place. If we forced ourselves to open quickly, right now, full force, it would cause a level of deficit that it would be very difficult to get out of. So we're doing this for the long-term sustainability of Old Salem. Thank you. Thank you, Sam. You do a great job.
Thank you, Frank. And thank you to all who watched and for all the wonderful questions. Really appreciate it. And as you can see on the screen now, there's contact information, places where you can find us, places where you can find updated information. So we encourage you to do so. And thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Have a great